There are people who never go looking for love. They don't go on blind dates, scroll through apps at 1 a.m., or ask their friends if they wrote a text message correctly. They just live, and for some reason, people are drawn to them. People appear around them who truly want to be near, not by chance, not out of pity. And then there are others, smart, interesting, worthy, who want closeness so badly that this craving can be felt from a mile away. And the harder they try, the further away what they seek retreats. I have been working with people for many years, and the most frequent question I hear in various forms sounds something like this: what am I doing wrong? I am trying. I want it so badly. Why isn't it working? Here is what I will tell you right now, at the very beginning, because it is important. The problem is not what you are doing. The problem is that you are trying at all. Searching for love is one of the most effective ways to scare it away. And today, I am going to explain to you why this is the case. Not from a romantic perspective, not from a the universe knows perspective, but from the perspective of psychology, common sense, and what I observe in real people every day. If you watch this video to the end, you will understand one thing that will change not how you behave on dates. It will change who you are in between them. Here is what you will get if you stay. I will explain a specific verifiable mechanism to you without any mysticism. Why do psychologically healthy people attract intimacy without effort? What happens inside a person who is searching, and why exactly does that push people away? And most importantly, what does it mean to let yourself be found in practice, not just in theory? Not by reading pretty phrases on a fridge magnet. I am not promising you that after this video you will meet a life partner tomorrow. I am promising you something more valuable. You will stop doing the things that are getting in your way. One warning. What I say next might seem harsh to some, perhaps uncomfortable. Good. That means it's working. Let's start with the obvious, which almost no one talks about out loud. A person searches for love not because they are bad or wrong. They search for it because somewhere inside a belief has formed there is something wrong with me. I need to fix it, and preferably through another person. This belief forms early, sometimes very early. A child who was loved conditionally when they were convenient, quiet, successful, obedient, learns a simple formula. Love must be earned. Love must be deserved. On my own, I am not enough. This formula becomes part of the foundation. It doesn't disappear with age. It just changes form. In adolescence, it looks like an obsessive crush. At 20, it's like a fear of loneliness. At 30, it's the feeling that everyone else has found their person, but for some reason, you haven't. At 40, it's a chronic anxiety that's hard to even name. And so a person begins to search, actively, purposefully, and with effort. It seems logical. If you want something, go and take it. It works with a career. It works with money. It works with almost everything, but it doesn't work with intimacy. Why? Here's the thing. Intimacy is not an object you can just grab. It is a state that emerges between two people under certain conditions. And one of those conditions is the absence of pressure, the presence of freedom, and the ability to be close because you want to, not because you've been trapped. The one who is searching exerts pressure. The one who exerts pressure pushes others away. This isn't a metaphor, it's a mechanism. Imagine a person, let's call him Indri. He's 38, smart, successful, looks fine on the outside, and he comes to me and says, I'm doing everything right. I go on dates, I take an interest in people, I don't act like an idiot, but something always goes wrong. Either they don't like me, or they do, but then they disappear. I ask him, what do you feel before a date? He says, hope. Intense hope. I think maybe this is the one. And there is the answer. Andre comes to every date with a hidden stake, with an expectation, with a need. It is invisible from the outside. He doesn't say it out loud, but it is felt. The person across from him picks up on it, not with their mind, with their body. People are very good at sensing when someone is trying to fill an internal void with them and most instinctively pull away. This isn't cruelty. It's a normal reaction of a mentally healthy person to pressure. Now watch what happens next. Andre notices that the person is cooling off. And what does he do? He starts trying harder, texting more often, making up reasons to meet, becoming more attentive, caring, and interesting. And the harder he tries, the faster the other person leaves. Andre does the right things, but he does them from the wrong place, from fear, from need, from that feeling of, I need to keep them because if they leave, it will confirm there's something wrong with me. But the person across from him doesn't feel cared for. They feel a trap. Here's the first thing that is important to understand. Behavior alone solves nothing. The exact same act, sending a message, calling, inviting someone to dinner, can be a natural expression of interest or a desperate attempt to hold on. And the difference between them isn't in the action, but in the state from which it originates. But this is only the first layer, because searching does something else to a person, something much deeper. When a person is in search mode, they stop seeing other people. It sounds strange, but let's break it down. Imagine a woman named Natasha. She is tired of being alone. She's 34, and she really wants a relationship. She goes on a date with a stranger, and what does she do? In the first 20 minutes, she evaluates. Is he a match? Is he not? Is he the one or not? Can this work or not? She isn't getting to know the person. She is checking him against an internal checklist. And this living, breathing human with his own history and quirks turns into a candidate, an applicant, an object for selection. This is a problem on both sides. First, it's impossible to truly see a person this way because you aren't looking at them. You're looking through them at your own expectations. Second, people can feel it. Being the object of an evaluation is unpleasant. It makes a person guarded, cautious, and unnatural. And then Natasha wonders, why are they all so stiff? Why won't they open up? Because you've turned the encounter into a job interview. But there is another effect of searching, one that is more subtle and more destructive. When a person desperately craves intimacy, they start seeing it where it doesn't exist. Someone sends a kind message in the morning and suddenly there's a fantasy spanning weeks ahead. Someone looks at them a certain way. An internal narrative about us is already formed. Someone acts tenderly once and the person in search mode builds an entire world from it, which later isn't confirmed. And the pain is disproportionate to the real relationship because there was no real relationship. There was a projection, an internal film produced in solitude. I see this all the time. Someone comes to me and says, I've been dumped. You start to look into it and they'd only met 3 times. But inside the person is a devastation like that of a long-term relationship. It's not weakness. It's a direct consequence of searching. When the need is immense, any signal seems like an answer, any spark like a lighthouse. And the fall is more painful because you're falling not from a real height, but an imagined one. Do you see what's happening? Searching doesn't just hinder finding. It actively creates pain. It makes a person more vulnerable, less realistic, and, importantly, less attractive. Because a person in a state of acute need radiates anxiety, and anxiety is contagious, and most healthy people instinctively move away from it. It creates a vicious cycle. Loneliness creates anxiety. Anxiety forces one to search. Searching pushes people away. People leave and the loneliness intensifies. This isn't fate. It's a mechanism, and it can be broken but only if you understand exactly where it fails. And now I will tell you what most psychologists say, only cautiously beating around the bush. I'll be blunt. You cannot find the right person as long as you just need someone. It sounds harsh, but it's the truth. And here is why. When a person is in a state of desperate need for a relationship, their criteria blur. They stop choosing and settle for whoever pays attention, whoever doesn't cause pain right now, or whoever is simply around. This isn't a choice, it's hunger. And starving people eat whatever is offered, regardless of whether it's healthy or not. I worked with a woman who chose the same type of men 3 times in a row. Not physically, but psychologically. Cold, distant, and unavailable. She realized it herself. She would say, I see the same thing happening again, but I can't help myself. When we started digging, we found this. An unavailable person gave her the chance to keep hunting within the relationship, to win them over, to pursue them. This state of pursuit was familiar to her, almost comfortable in the sense that it was what she knew. But calm, reliable, open people seemed boring to her, because with them, the pursuit ended, and she didn't know how to end it. And that is the truly terrifying trap of the chase. Sometimes people aren't looking for a partner. They are looking for the state of pursuit because it feels familiar from childhood, because that's what love looked like in their family, something to be earned, won, and held onto. And when that happens, a person can't get what they want, even if it ends up right in front of them. Because right here doesn't fit the script. It's important to understand this, not to judge yourself. It's important to understand this, to figure out exactly what you are actually working with. Because if the problem is behavior, we change the behavior. But if the problem goes deeper into the core belief that love must be extracted, then behavior has nothing to do with it. And no flirting techniques, no texting rules, or don't message first advice will help. You need something else. Now, for the most important, practical and concrete part, allowing yourself to be found isn't passivity. It's not about sitting at home waiting. And it's not mystical talk about the universe. It's a specific psychological state. And I will describe it piece by piece now. First, having a life of your own that truly engages you. Not as a strategy to attract, not to seem interesting, but because a person who has a real full life with meaning, physically not in pursuit mode, they are too busy, they don't need it. This is fundamental. I am not talking about creating an illusion of being busy. I am talking about being truly absorbed in what matters to you. When a person has work that fascinates them, friendships that nourish them, hobbies they get lost in, and values they follow, they don't have that hungry void that needs to be urgently filled by someone else. And then the other person doesn't arrive into a void, they arrive to someone who is alive. That is a difference everyone always feels. Yes. Second, the absence of an internal deficit. This is the hardest thing to explain and the hardest thing to do. Well, give it a try. A deficit is the feeling that something is missing for life to be normal, that without a partner you are incomplete, that without a relationship something is wrong. This belief lives deep down and is broadcast through your gaze, your tone, how you react when someone doesn't text back, how much you need to be liked, and how much the silence after a date worries you. People with an internal deficit want one thing to finally be chosen, because then the deficit will be closed, or so they think. But here is the problem. Another person cannot close your internal deficit, even if they really want to, even if They try with all their might because the deficit is inside you, not outside. A person who understands this for real, not just intellectually, but in their body, stops looking for a partner as a solution in their daily choices. They stop needing to be chosen, and that is when something interesting happens. They become attractive in a completely different way. Not because they became better looking or smarter, but because that pressure no longer radiates from them. That quiet plea, choose me, that invisible but palpable anxiety, and people are drawn to them, naturally, without any effort on their part. Third, the ability to see a person, not a candidate. Remember Natasha, who would go on dates and immediately start evaluating. A person who allows themselves to be found does the opposite. They arrive with interest in the specific person before them, without pre-made list, without an internal bet on the outcome. This doesn't mean they don't have criteria. They have criteria, but they don't dominate the encounter. They don't turn a live conversation into a job interview. They are curious. They are open. They hear what the person across from them is saying, not what they want to hear. And that is a rarity. It's rare because most people on dates are preoccupied with themselves, how they look, what is being thought of them, whether they fit the bill. A person who is truly present and interested in the other stands out instantly. Not because they try to stand out, but because that in itself is rare. We need to stop here and talk about anxiety, because it is the central mechanism of everything we are discussing. Relationship anxiety comes in different forms, but I usually see two types. First type is anxiety of expectations. Why isn't he texting back? What does this mean? Maybe I did something wrong. Maybe he didn't like it. Maybe I wrote too much or too little, or too fast or too late. This internal monologue is familiar to many. It can last for hours, sometimes days. What does it do to a person? It wears them out. It keeps a person in a state of high alert, like a tight string. And when the answer finally comes, the person either feels relief or a new wave of anxiety, depending on the content. You can live like that for long. It literally drains the nervous system. The second type is anxiety of loss. What if they leave? What if they find someone better? What if this is my last chance? This type is more dangerous because it makes a person do things that speed up exactly what they fear. Let's break this down specifically. The person is afraid that their partner will leave. Out of this fear, they start controlling where the partner is, who they are with, and what they are doing. Or they start people-pleasing, doing things they don't want to, agreeing with things they don't believe in, keeping quiet about things that need to be discussed, or demanding constant reassurance. Do you love me? We are still together, right? Tell me everything is okay? What happens over time to the person being controlled, being pleased out of fear, and constantly having to provide reassurance? They get tired, they feel suffocated, they leave. And the one who feared losing them, loses them precisely because they were afraid. I know it's hard to hear, but let's be honest. Fear of loss is not a sign of love. It's a sign of dependency on another person, their validation, and their presence as a guarantee that you are okay. It's not about them. It's about you. And until that becomes clear, nothing will change. Anxiety is a signal. It says, there is something here that I don't know how to handle, so ignoring it is pointless, but giving in to it is too. Anxiety needs to be explored. Where does it come from? What exactly am I afraid of losing? What does this tell me about myself? This is work, sometimes long work, but there is no other way. I want to describe to you what a person who allows themselves to be found looks like, not in theory, but specifically. It's a person who is comfortable with themselves, not in the sense of euphoria or constant happiness, but in the sense of basic calmness. They can spend an evening alone, and it's not a catastrophe. They might not get a reply to a message and not turn it into a tragedy. They can part ways with someone and understand that perhaps it wasn't the right person. No output, that means something is wrong with me. It is not coldness. It is stability. He is interested in meeting people, but without stakes. He goes on a date and thinks, let's see who they are. Maybe this is it. He is honest. If he dislikes something, he says so. If he likes it, he says that too. He does not adjust to what he thinks the other person wants to hear. He says what he thinks calmly, without aggression, but without a people-pleasing filter. He knows how to refuse and how to accept rejection without it destroying his self-image. And this is important. He does not turn a meeting with someone into a relationship-building project. He just interacts, lives, and takes an interest. And if something arises between him and another person, it happens naturally as a result of both wanting to continue. This is what it means to let yourself be found to be alive, real, accessible, yet independent. Now you might think, sounds good, but how do I do it? And this is where I have to tell you something most won't like. There is no quick fix. There are behavioral techniques. There are many of them. Don't text first. Create intrigue. Don't show you want them. Pretend to be busy. I understand where this comes from. People want concrete tools, but all these techniques work on the surface. They change behavior, but not the state from which it stems. And sooner or later, that state breaks through. A person snaps, texts at 3 a.m., demands explanations, cries when they plan to be calm, because you can't play the role of someone you're not for long. Real change is internal, and it requires time, honesty with yourself, and sometimes professional help. But there are things you can start doing right now, not as attraction techniques, but as self-work. First, stop evaluating every contact in terms of perspective. Met someone interesting? Good, that's an interesting person. Period. No need to build a scenario right away. No need to guess where it will lead. Stay with what is right now. Second, fill your life with things that are important to you. Not to look busy, but because an empty life waiting for a relationship is not a life, it's a pause. And being in a pause for years is agonizing and meaningless. Work that has meaning, friendships that nourish, a body you take care of, interests that develop you. This is not an accessory to a relationship. It is the foundation. And it is this foundation that makes you a person others want to come to. Third, learn to notice anxiety and not act on it. Anxiety says, write to him right now. Settle things. Demand clarity. Do not do this in a moment of anxiety. Let it settle down. Ask yourself, is this a real problem or is it my anxiety looking for release? The difference between these two things is huge, and knowing how to tell them apart is a skill that is developed. Fourth, allow yourself to be yourself from the very beginning. This is the hardest and most important part. Many people put on the best version of themselves at the start of relationship. They are cautious. They act interested in things they aren't interested in. They stay silent about what they think. They create an image and then live in fear that the image will be exposed. It is exhausting and dishonest and pointless because sooner or later the person will see you, not the image. And it's better for that to happen at the beginning. When you say what you think from the start, do what you want and decline what you don't like. You do a simple thing, yes, simple thing. You allow the person opposite you to understand if they want to be with the real you, not your front page version. And if they don't, it's not a tragedy, it's useful information. Early information. Now I want to talk about what lies behind all of this, the searching, the anxiety, the inability to simply be, the fear of loneliness. It is one of the most powerful fears I work with and one of the most misunderstood because most people confuse loneliness as a state with loneliness, as a catastrophe. The first is simply a fact. There is no partner nearby right now. The second is an interpretation. If I am alone, it means I am unneeded, unloved, and inadequate. The state is neutral. The interpretation is destructive. And here's what's interesting. People who fear loneliness as a catastrophe usually don't know how to be alone with themselves. It is not the same thing to be alone and to feel comfortable with yourself. There are people who can spend an evening in silence, and that is fine. They think, read, feel, and rest. They know who they are when no one is watching. And there are people who find being with themselves unbearable, who need a TV, a phone, a companion, any noise to drown out what starts to sound in the silence. These people don't just want a partner. They need someone who will be nearby constantly, because otherwise what is inside becomes too loud. This is not a relationship. This is anesthesia. And here's the paradox. A person who cannot stand themselves attracts a partner who also cannot. They become a silencer for one another and call it love. Real intimacy is when two people are good together, but each of them is also good separately. This is not coldness. This is maturity. Being comfortable alone is not just a nice trait to have. It is a fundamental requirement for building something real with another person, because someone who finds being alone unbearable will demand too much from a partner, craving constant presence, validation, and attention. And when a partner doesn't provide enough, which they can't do forever, as they have their own life resentment, complaints, and conflicts begin. Therefore, if you want a relationship, learn to be with yourself first. Not because it sounds good, but because otherwise you will build your relationship on a foundation of fear. And that is an unstable structure. Sooner or later, it will collapse. There is a question that I am asked quite often. It goes like this: Michail, but there are people who do nothing, and others are still drawn to them. Why? I will answer honestly. People are not drawn to those who do nothing. They are drawn to those who radiate certain qualities. And that quality is not confidence in the traditional sense, not dominance, not looks, and not status. It is the absence of a need for your approval. This is a very specific thing. Someone looks at you, and you realize they are glad to see you, yet you sense they will be fine if you leave. They won't fall apart. They won't text you at 3 a.m., and they won't demand explanations. This strangely attracts people because you feel a sense of freedom around such a person. No pressure, no traps. You can be yourself without the risk of being punished for it later. And it is precisely this freedom that is the basis of all true attraction. Now, an important point. Some people try to imitate this quality. They act cold on purpose, don't respond on purpose, and create distance on purpose. That is not it. That is manipulation. And it works, but only on a certain type of person, those who have their own unresolved history with unavailability and the chase. This is not the attraction of healthy people. It is the reproduction of unhealthy patterns. True absence of need is not coldness. It is warmth combined with inner stability. It is when someone feels good with you and shows it, but their well-being does not depend on whether you reciprocate. This is something that is not developed through techniques, but through working on yourself and honestly answering, where does my need come from? What exactly do I want to get from another person that I cannot give to myself? Because everything you want to get from the outside but cannot give yourself from within, you will demand from a partner for the rest of your life. And that will destroy the relationship, no matter how good that partner may be. Let's talk about what this looks like in real life. Let's go back to Andre, the one we started with, who went on a date with huge personal stakes and where everything kept going wrong. We worked together for a few months, and the first thing that changed wasn't his behavior on dates, but his attitude toward his own life. He stopped seeing his work as just a way to make money before a real relationship appeared, and started seeing it as meaningful in its own right. He returned to hobbies he had once quit because he didn't have time. He started hanging out with friends without feeling like it was second-rate compared to a romantic encounter. About 3 months later, he came to me and said, I was on a date yesterday, and for the first time, I wasn't thinking about whether they liked me. I was just talking to a person. That's a small shift on the outside, but a huge one on the inside. That meeting, by the way, didn't lead to anything. Nothing sparked. But Andre felt no pain from that because there were no stakes. It was just an evening with an interesting stranger, and that's it. About 6 months later, he met a woman. Not through an app, not at a special dating event. At a friend's birthday party, they talked for 3 hours. Then he called simply because he wanted to, not because it was the right thing to do or enough time had passed. Now they are together. This isn't a fairy tale or a guarantee. Life is more complicated than that. But the difference is in how it all began. No chasing, no strategy, no internal monologue about whether he was doing everything right. This is what it means to let yourself be found. To be alive, to be busy with your own life, to be open, and not to turn every meeting into an exam. But I want to add one more thing, because without it, the picture wouldn't be complete. Sometimes a person does everything right, outwardly living their own life, not chasing or pushing. But that voice still remains inside. When will it happen? That is not the same thing as true peace of mind. It's calmness won over anxiety, a mask instead of a face. And people don't sense it right away, but they do feel it. That's why I always say the work doesn't end with behavior. It begins with an honest answer to the question, am I truly happy right now? Or am I just waiting for someone to appear so I can finally be happy? If it's the latter, that is a signal, not a reason for shame, but a signal that there is something you need to work on. I will tell you something that most relationship coaches won't, because it doesn't sell well. Some people don't find a partner for a long time, not because they are doing something wrong, but because they choose consciously or not people who aren't right for them. It's not malice, it's a pattern. The habit of choosing the familiar, even if the familiar causes pain. A person who grew up with a cold, critical parent will choose cold, critical partners over and over again. Not because they are a masochist, but because it feels familiar. It feels like love in the only form they know. And here's what happens when such a person meets someone warm, reliable, and stable. They get bored. They get anxious. It feels like something is wrong because it's too calm, it's too simple. They think such a person cannot be interesting. It's not about the person, quite the contrary. It's about the frame of reference you grew up in, where love is tension, where intimacy is a struggle, where warmth without drama is incomprehensible and alien. Until this frame of reference changes, you will continue to choose the same thing in different faces, with different names, with the same results. It is important to understand this, not to blame your parents or yourself, but to ask an honest question. Is the person I am looking for what I actually need? or do I just need the familiar? The familiar feeling, even if it is painful, is hard work to overcome. Sometimes it requires therapy, sometimes just time and honesty. But without it, you can change strategies, apps, cities, and still encounter the same thing. Because we don't attract who we want, we attract those who match our inner state. It's not cruel, it's honest. Now I want to say a few things about what intimacy looks like when it is real. Not in movies, but in real life, true intimacy is when you don't have to pretend, when you can say what you think without fear of destroying anything. When you can be in a bad mood and the person beside you doesn't panic that something is wrong with the relationship. It's when you value the person but don't need them to feel okay. It's when their presence adds to your life rather than filling a hole in it. It's when you can be apart for a week and meet again with joy, not with distrust. It's when you don't need to check their phone because you have enough self-respect to know that if something is wrong, you will find out or leave without drama. This doesn't mean there are no conflicts in such relationships. They exist, but a conflict is a conversation about a real disagreement, not an explosion of accumulated anxiety. And here's what is important. Such relationships are built from the same material as the two people living in them. From psychological health, the ability to be yourself, and the absence of chronic neediness. It's not magic. It's a result. The result of working on yourself, on what you've carried since childhood, on beliefs that tell you you're not enough, and on the anxiety that makes you search where you should just live. I'm not saying this to scare you. I'm saying this to guide you to where things can actually be changed. Not in messaging strategies or first date techniques, but within. All right. I understand that all this might sound correct, but abstract. So let's get specific with a few things I recommend to everyone who saw themselves in what we talked about today. First, notice how you feel when you are alone. Not on bad days, but on ordinary ones, when there are no tasks, no people, no noise. What comes up? Peace or anxiety, boredom, emptiness. This is important information about you. Don't judge it. Just notice it. Second, track your expectations before meeting someone new. When you go on a date or meet a new person, what happens inside? Is there an internal stake? I hope that this one, just notice it without judgment. Third, ask yourself, what am I doing in my life besides waiting for a relationship? Is there something that truly occupies you? Something that makes sense on its own, regardless of whether a partner is there or not? If not, this isn't a reproach. It's a task to find, to track, and to invest your energy. Fourth, allow yourself to say what you think from the very beginning. Not to be rude or pushy, but to be yourself. This might mean saying, I'm not interested in this, instead of pretending you are. It might mean disagreeing when you don't agree. Yes, some won't like it, but those who do will see the real you, not an image. Fifth, if you feel anxious, don't act on it. You want to text right now? Wait, you want to sort things out at 3 a.m.? Wait, you want to demand explanations? Wait, let the anxiety settle. Often it turns out that it was just anxiety, not a signal of a real threat. And sixth, the last one. If you notice that time after time you fall into the same situations, it's a sign that the problem isn't the situations. It sounds unpleasant, but it's the path to real change. To look for them where they really happen, inside. I want to end with this. Behind all of this, behind the searching, the anxiety, the patterns is one thing, the desire to be loved truly, without conditions. This isn't a weakness. It's a human need, basic and normal. But often people look outside for what they lacked inside or what they weren't given in childhood. And that's normal to understand. But that doesn't mean another person can provide it. Another person can love you, but they cannot heal your old wounds. They cannot convince you that you are enough if you don't believe it yourself. They cannot give you security if you carry the inner belief that it will always vanish. That is work you do yourself or with a professional, but by yourself. And here's what I have noticed over years of work. People who do this work don't necessarily find a partner quickly. Sometimes they do. Sometimes they don't. But they begin to live differently. They stop living in anticipation. Start living now. Stop judging their life as incomplete without a partner. And start seeing that it already has people, meaning, and opportunities. And that is not a coincidence. That is exactly when something changes. Because they stop radiating need, stop clinging, and start being alive, authentic, and free. Those are the kinds of people others want. Free, alive, and authentic. Allowing yourself to be found is not a strategy, it is a state of being. The state of a person who is okay with themselves, who has something to give, not just to take, who is happy now, not just when someone is around. It is achievable. It requires work, but it is the only thing that actually works. If anything you heard today hit home, write about it in the comments. It doesn't have to be detailed, just what exactly. It is important for me to know what resonates. And if you want to keep thinking about this together, you know what to do. Thank you for being here.